It's that time of year where we have to get together with all of those family. This week's sponsor is Dungeon Fog, and so because today's video is all about role-playing with your family, I've shared up this very, very simple little map of a village and a cave system on the dungeonfog.com website. You can download it under the public galleries, just use the keyword GreatGM to find it and use it for running your games. Alternatively, grab a license and you can edit the map to your heart's content. Use the code GreatGM to get an amazing discount off of your subscription for the service. Now, why would you subscribe? Well, they release new content, new action packs filled with icons and tokens and things every single second month. It's well worth investing in this software. I absolutely love it. And there's a map for you. So I would say, Happy Christmas, everybody. Thank you, Dungeon Fog. You know we love you. Right, on with the show. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy and today we are looking at how to play a role-playing game with your family over the festive period. Now this video is assuming the following. Your family are not particularly fantasy fanatics. They are not role players and don't really know what it is that you and your mates do down in that basement or in the loft or online or wherever it is that you guys role play. And also, they're mildly keen to support you and show you that they care about your hobbies, when in actual fact, they're kind of just humoring you. How do we make this the experience that's going to get them all to go, you know what, here's my money, let's buy some role-playing books? Well, there are a couple things we're going to have to look at in order to do this. And I'm going to start off by saying we don't use any of the official written material. But let's look at where to start. When I think of those people that I love so much, and I think about introducing them to the remarkable world of role-playing and my genius of creativity and narrative power, I have no idea where to start exactly. We need to contextualize what role-playing is in the first place. So you need to explain to your family that they're going to be representing characters. Each one of them will represent a single specific character, and they're going to make the decisions for that character. Now, something that is perhaps it's a pitfall, perhaps it's not a pitfall, it's entirely up to you to decide on the nature of your family, is to either suggest that they use the terms I when referring to their character, or they use the character's name and go third person. Now, the benefit, of course, with going with I is that it makes it much more immersive. I run to the door. I have a look here. I have a look there. But some people might not be comfortable with that, including yourself, in which case then simply go with using third person. Brian goes over to the door and looks out through the window. Make sure that as the GM, you are then keeping in that same space. So let's give them some basic ideas that they're going to be representing their character and that their character is going to be doing things within a world that you are going to be creating. Now, this is the next part that needs to be very clearly outlined, is that this might not necessarily have to be in a fantasy setting. As a matter of fact, in my own personal experience, oftentimes it's actually easier to do role-playing, especially with the older folks who are not so deep into the whole idea of fantasy and who've forgotten what it was like to be kids and to play way back when, is to set it in a modern day setting, or to even set it in their hometown. Let them experience what it's like to not be them. Perhaps it's their neighbors, or perhaps it's a team who've come into the neighborhood. Put it into a space that makes sense to them. If they're going, oh, I don't know about elves, I don't know about what these dwarf. What's a dwarf? Is Star Wars the one where Captain Picard uses that telephone booth to fly around and hunt that little green alien thing? What's its name? E.T. Don't try and force your preferred system or your preferred setting, I should say, onto your family. you putting this into something that they will understand and that they will be able to actually make sense of. So contextualize it for them. You then also need to explain to them that this is a collaborative game. They're not trying to manipulate one another. They're not trying to kill one another, but that they may have to use violence against others. And because it's all fantastical, that violence really, it is just imaginary. Having said that, though, it is useful to let them know that they should run away if they don't think they can control the situation, and that they should try and talk to as many of the characters that they're going to encounter in this world space. You are quite literally laying the foundation for potential future role players here, so try and encourage them to play the game that you want to play. Most importantly, do not tell them that this is about number crunching. Now, you might get some family members who love the idea of crunching numbers and running Excel spreadsheet characters. That's absolutely fine. I've generally found, though, on the whole, when you start talking numbers, people start glazing over, because it doesn't matter how simple you make it, it's still a completely foreign language in terms of them understanding. So put it in somewhere that they can understand and that they can take and make sense of. Finally, you need to tell them that their characters can potentially die. This is not a death-free zone. If they make poor decisions, if they just wander into a bar and they just start attacking people, people will attack back. Their choices have consequences. This is very important for them to understand. Their choices have consequences, and that they need to understand that just because this is a game of make-believe, there are rules within that world that are very similar to our own. Again, unless the family really wants to play fantasy, if they've just watched The Rings of Power, or if they are more inclined towards fantasy, that's okay. You still need to tell them, though, that even in this fantastical environment, there are consequences for their actions. So that's where we start, is just by giving them that overview. It shouldn't take a long time, folks. This should be a 5 to 10 minute speech at best. And then, of course, you answer any questions that they might have, but avoid going too deep. So that's step one.
All right, fine. In that case, then, I will introduce them to the complexities and the intricacies of creating the ultimate thief, or perhaps the greatest warlock. I'll let them look at the percentage chances of success and failure. Maybe I'll just create characters for each of them. That way we can get into it straight away. Yes, I think that I'll build an intricately complex multi-character.
Oh, okay. No, definitely. Okay, so avoid pre-generated characters. You are not helping anybody at the table if you are giving them this page filled with statistics and numbers that they have no context where they came from, that has no meaning. It is literally going to be for them, find the number when you are talking about things. They won't contextualize, they won't understand, they won't link things together, at least not initially. So what I suggest you do is that you give them a piece of paper and you get each one of them to write down 3 boxes. You will make 3 boxes and write into those 3 boxes physical, spiritual, and mental. These are 3 categories that you will find in almost all role-playing games in some shape or form or another. And if you look at the basic Dungeons & Dragons, that's exactly what they have. Strength and dexterity, then they have intelligence and wisdom, and then constitution, charisma for spirituality. In a broad sense, okay? So give them those 3 boxes, then get them to assign the number 3, 2, and 1 to those boxes. They can choose. One of them gets 3, one of them gets 2, and one of them gets 1. And explain that 3 is better than 2 and is better than 1. This is really simple stuff, folks, but we need to make sure that all of the additional burden of role-playing, which really is all of the rules, is as minimal as possible, because we don't want it to get in the way. We don't want anyone to have to read books or anything like that. This is what you're meant to be doing, having fun whilst role-playing during the festive season. So they assign those 3. And if they're not sure, well, if you want your character to be quite strong and physically powerful, well, that goes into your physical box. If you want them to be smart and intelligent and know things, that would go into your mental box. And if you want them to be charming and enduring and have a good willpower and the ability to resist, well, that you would put into your spiritual box. And then the other numbers go elsewhere. All right, it's as simple as that. Then you get them to make another box, which is called health. And into that health box, you simply put the number 12. Give everybody the same amount of health for now. This is not about making it complicated. Finally, that's right, you then give each and every single one of them one ability. So if the person has created a physically strong character, their physical is high. If you are running in a fantasy environment, give them a sword and a shield. If you are running in a modern day setting, give them a gun. If they are in a sci-fi setting, give them a phaser. Give them something that is going to allow them to be physically dangerous within that environment. If they are more intellectual, if they've gone more with the mental statistic, give them something that goes with that. Perhaps it's a spell that allows them to manipulate something from 20 meters away. If you're not going with fantasy, perhaps it gives them the ability to recall some piece of data or historical event. Or if they are going with something along the lines of spiritual, give them the ability to sweet talk their way out of anything. What you then tell them is that with those abilities, they all get a +1 when they are doing that particular ability. That's it. That is all that they need. Then you get them to create a name, get them to fill in the fun stuff, the stuff that really has nothing to do with anything. So it's hair color. Get them to try and create and embody this character as much as possible. Again, a suggestion could be you keeping it simple. You are not burdening them with lots of things. Make it stuff that they can relate to. That's the bottom line. All right? And that is step 2. You're almost ready to start playing.
Yeah, all right, fine. If I can't have characters or system, I will weave a complex story, intricate plots that interweave with one another, leaving our players absolutely gobsmacked at this epic saga which I have created with them and using their little puny thoughts and ideas. It shall be a Christmas opus to be remembered for all.
Okay, it's about introducing your family to the notion of role-playing. And so what that means is that we need to show them the different aspects of role-playing, not bombard them with this gigantic saga of your creative greatness. That's not what we need to do. What we need to do is say, okie dokes, folks, you are going to have some kind of social encounter where the character who's got good spiritual stuff, who can charm or fast talk their way out of situations, where they can roll 2d6 or 1d6. It really doesn't matter, chaps. It does not matter. Remember, they've got those stat blocks. You add that number plus the dice that you've rolled, plus if you have the skill that gives you +1. So you're adding those 3 things together. And if your result is higher than 5 or whatever, this is not a complex system, they succeed. They should succeed, I would say, 50 to 60% of the time, because you want them to experience the outcomes of success as well as the outcomes of failure. And you need to explain to them, well, you're trying to charm this ambassador into giving you specific information, but it's highly classified. So roll your d6, add your spiritual, add your sweet talking ability, but you need to get an 8. So that means you would have to roll a 5 or higher or a 6 or higher. And if they fail, take them and walk them through that. So give them a social encounter. That social encounter should lead them into a combat encounter, because I like to think of social encounters as being sort of gentle introductions. Characters have got more time to think. They've got more times to act. And then you go into combat. Combat is super simple. They roll to hit. The enemy rolls to defend using physical always, right? And then the enemy attacks and They get to roll their defense using physical, so they roll a d6, they add their physical, compare the two results, the difference is the damage that they take. You do a very simple combat, and then you give them a riddle. So the combat leads them to this riddle. It could be as simple as going to go and find a riddle online. You could make up a kind of riddle, you could give them a maze, you could give them something that just tests the intellectual capacity of the characters. It could even be you're in a library and you have to find the right page in a book, and you've given them some cryptic clues about what that book is. Now, of course, if you have family members that are playing this character that's got good mental stats, and they have a favorite book, and you happen to know what their favorite book is, and you're playing in a modern day setting, you could include that as being part of the thing, right? Nonetheless, it's about making sure that the players are using their real-world knowledge as much as possible to give it as an accessible space as possible. This is why fantasy is very tricky, right? So all of that combines together, and as they solve the riddle, you go, you've solved the riddle. Well done. This brings you to the realization that the ambassador that you were speaking to earlier is actually a double agent working for the KGB or for whatever your setting is, and that there is a bigger plot here which you've only just touched the iceberg, or the tip of the iceberg of, or found the tip of the iceberg, or whatever it is. Use better English than I'm using in this video. If they go, okay, well, what's next? You have hooked them. You've got them interested in the narrative. And now, if you are so inclined, you can now add in some things. If you want to, you can add in some more skill sets. You can drive things a little bit better. But I would always say, play on for another hour or two. Or if they're really engaged and you're having a lot of fun using this really simple system as well, and they're having fun, let it run for 2 or 3 hours, and then let them sit back and go, we just played for 4 hours. This is amazing. Now we understand what you do. But if 1 or 2 of them are getting bored, then call a timeout. Let them go and have their break, and then quite simply offer to run a game the next day or whenever it might be, but then ask them if they want a slightly more complex system. Now here again, they may have heard about Dungeons & Dragons. It has the best marketing on the planet in terms of role-playing games. You could introduce them to Dungeons & Dragons if you think that they are ready for it. I don't like to say this, but I'm going to. The younger generation are far more inclined to play Dungeons & Dragons than the older generation, simply because of context. The younger generation are exposed to fantasy all the time. It's something that is just easier to grasp if you're exposed to it all the time. The older generation, not so much. And I'm not going to tell you what I define as an older or a younger generation. It's entirely up to you, as it is subjective. I would suggest, though, that you look at simple systems to begin with. Let them have a taste of things that are out there. Things like my Bounty Hunter role-playing game. It really is diceless and it's meant to be super simple for this exact reason. It's an introductory kind of role-playing system. Other role-playing systems, Call of Cthulhu, percentile system. It's fairly straightforward, especially if you use just the surface kind of stuff. You could also look at Lone Wolf, which was a role-playing series based on Choose Your Own Adventure books. Very, very simple. D10 if you want to start introducing different sided die to the organization. Or one of my personal favorites is this old classic, Dungeoneer, which was released by Sir Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson a couple decades ago now. This is my ancient and battered copy. It's a D6 system, very simple, very straightforward, and you can jump straight in and start role-playing.
Until next time, I want to say a massive thank you to all of our wonderful Patreons who support this channel and my madness in terms of creating this content. Thank you, thank you, thank you to each and every single one of you. Now, if you have been watching this channel for the last year, you will have noticed experience points popping up in certain videos as we have worked our way through the practical guide to becoming a great GM. That experience is for you, and I know it sounds silly, but by watching all of these videos, I do hope that you, just as much as I have in creating all of this material, have learned to do your hobby in a different way, or better way, a faster way, a more creative way. If it has, leave your comments down below. What does the experience points that you have gathered, what does that experience point mean to you? How has it changed your game? share that so that we can all enjoy it. And all I can say is well done to you for having worked through all of that experience and for having worked through those videos. I can only hope to be able to play in one of your games, because I'm fairly certain it must be spectacular. Until we meet again, I wish you and yours and everybody else the very happiest of gaming.